Good morning. My name is Abena Asare, and I am Associate Professor of Africana Studies and History at Stony Brook University. I'm also a member of the Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group, or BLARG, a community-led grassroots coalition that has come together to expose the harm of the Brookhaven landfill and to act strategically to acknowledge, address, and remediate this harm. I'm so honored to be here today with Building Bridges Brookhaven, taking just a few moments to think together about the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and about his legacy and what that legacy might mean for us today in 2021 and in our particular geography here in Eastern Long Island. I want to start today with some complaints lodged by the teachers and staff of the Frank P. Long Intermediate School in the South Country School District. This school, which serves 5th and 6th graders, is located a short distance away from the Brookhaven landfill. On September 28, 2015, one of the staff of the Frank P. Long Intermediate School submitted an odor complaint about the landfill. Here is what they wrote. On a Monday, the last thing I want to do is be greeted by the odor and have to start my busy day by taking the time to complain about this odor. I have asthma, and chemical odors in the air trigger my attacks. Please do something. Another complaint, April 14th, 2016. We have to give a state test to our students this morning. This odor from the landfill is so unfair to all of us in this area. Another complaint, January 5th, 2016. Someone reported an odor that they described as heavy sewage landfill odor. And this resident simply wrote, "Make it stop," in all capital letters. February 9th, 2016, again reporting an odor. One resident writes, "It's disgusting and probably killing us. Please fix it." February 13th, 2016, something needs to be done when you can't stand outside your home without wanting to throw up. I don't even want to invite people over because I'm embarrassed. Brookhaven, you need to do something now. March 29th, 2016, where do we go from here? New wells installed, nothing accomplished, absolutely nothing. But the town is approved for 2 more phases of landfill construction. May 3rd, 2016, disgusting, shameful, killing us slowly. I could go on and on. The complaints go on and on. There's only one place to begin when talking about the Brookhaven landfill, this grave environmental injustice that is, as I often say, hiding in plain sight. We begin with the people, the everyday experience of the human beings who live, play, and work in the shadow of this landfill. Since it was established in 1974, over the past almost 50 years, this landfill has swelled and grown into a behemoth, a structure so large that we scarce can take it in or assess all of its impacts. We begin with the noxious odors, the smells, day in and day out. We begin with the frustration. How deeply painful to have complained, to have spoken out, to have written to your elected officials, to have sought the advice of lawyers, to have struggled against this situation for decades, and to never have received a proper hearing. How sad to see how this landfill has torn up this community. To sit with the tears and hurt of the teachers and staff of the Frank P. Long School. How distressing in this age of COVID-19, a deadly virus that preys on adverse respiratory conditions, to know that your community is in the 80th to 95th percentile nationally for all environmental justice indicators about poor air quality, and to know that nothing at all is being done about it. In Brookhaven town, a mound of earth rises 276 feet above sea level. It is one of the 5 highest elevation points in Suffolk County. This mound was not present when Long Island was known by the Algonquin-speaking peoples as Siwanhake or Pamanake. This mountain did not loom when the Unkachug people depended on the nearby Carmen River for sustenance and ceremony. Unlike the other Long Island peaks, this topographical feature is man-made, or more accurately, it is settler-made. Beneath the topsoil, there are layers of incineration ash, construction and demolition debris, unprocessed solid waste, fuel, oil, animal carcasses, PVC liners, and all other remnants from a half-century of unbridled consumption on Long Island. How did this come to be? What are the choices, small and large, that have led to this status quo, where a high-volume landfill is located adjacent to a neighborhood full of people who are being bombarded every day by the toxins associated with mismanaged waste? Can anything at all be done about it? The Brookhaven landfill is such a permanent feature in our landscape. It is so massive. It has been here for so long that it seems almost impossible to imagine a future without it. The most common reaction that I receive when I share this story is disbelief. Almost everyone agrees, at least those who dare to open their eyes and look at the reality, that this situation is wrong. However, people find it very hard to believe that anything can be done about it. Can this landfill be closed? Could it actually be cleaned up? This seems like an almost impossible task. And that is why I'm so glad that we gather today in the memory of Reverend Dr. King, because this work of seemingly impossible task, this work of radical transformation, this was Reverend King's work. Throughout his life and even up until his death, Reverend King took on systems and structures that, like our landfill, were intractable, which seemed impossible to change. Building the so-called beloved community in U.S. soil, bloodied as it is with indigenous genocide, African enslavement, and all other crimes against humanity, this seems like an impossible task. Singing, "We shall overcome, we'll walk hand in hand," while knowing that U.S. bombs were bursting in Asia, while being aware of our government's impacts in Africa and Latin America. This is an impossible task. Throughout his life, Reverend King fought for transformations that were deeply necessary, but often difficult to imagine from where folks stood in historical time until they happened. Someone has to hold the vision. I'll say that again. Someone has to hold the vision for better, for restoration, and for wholeness, even in this land, even at this time. And I am so grateful to some of my dear friends and leaders and teachers within North Bellport who have been holding this vision for better throughout all these decades, even when the rest of the town largely ignored the issue. It is the communities who are most proximate and who are most impacted who have brought this issue to light again and again. So we at Blarg are committed to supporting those communities, to standing alongside them, to continue building them up so that we can continue this fight together. It was the folks in Brookhaven Hamlet, another proximate community, that first spoke out about their wells in the 1980s. Well, come to find that the liner of the landfill has broken down and toxins are leaching into Long Island's groundwater and that our sole source aquifer is at risk. It is the folks in North Bellport who have been speaking out about these noxious odors for decades, saying our air quality matters. And finally, just this year, we see that the town has had to pay $250,000 to the United States EPA for violating the Federal Clean Air Act. North Bellport, this small community adjacent to the landfill, has the lowest life expectancy throughout all of Long Island. The bodies of our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, are literally sounding the alarm about this situation. But can we hear them? There are people on the front lines of this fight. So when that question is asked, can the landfill actually be closed? Can it really be cleaned up? Is it possible? If we are in relationship with our neighbors in North Bellport, if we are in love with those people, with those children, with those fierce activists, with that community, the answer comes easily from our lips. We do not even have to think about it. Yes. Yes, it can be closed. Yes, it can be cleaned up. It has to be. We do not want the landfill in the backyard of North Bellport, and we do not want it in anyone's backyard. This fight to close and clean up the Brookhaven landfill is a fight to do the hard work of being accountable for our waste, of creating a just and sustainable plan to reduce our waste from the source by employing and advocating for zero waste strategies. In this struggle, we'll have to divert our waste stream by having bold and measurable targets for recycling, reuse, and reclamation of different kinds of waste. We have to respond to the climate crisis, to come to terms with the reality that municipal solid waste incinerators, like Covanta Energy right here in Long Island, are some of the biggest polluters in the state. And we need to divest from this cycle of boundless consumption, burn, and dump. In short, this is the fight of our lifetime. It's also a fight for our children. It's a fight to give all those beautiful kids playing in the shadow of the landfill their shot at a healthy life. It's a fight to show our next generation that when we say we value all peoples, that we have a government that offers equal protections to all of us. When we come together to praise Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once a year, that our words are backed up by action. Our kids need to see that we mean it. So I am a historian, a professor at Stony Brook. And one of the things I'm fond of telling my students is that in the very same way that systems of racial injustice were constructed painstakingly and with much effort over the decades, they can also be deconstructed with the same amount of effort and painstaking labor over the decades. The only question is, are we willing to do the work? So I want to just sketch out the history and the choices that have led to the violence of the Brookhaven landfill that we are trying to address together right now. It is impossible to understand the story of the Brookhaven landfill without addressing the region's history of racial segregation. Land use patterns in Long Island have never been race neutral. Racial division was integral to how Long Island suburbs were built in the post-World War II period. Housing developers, municipalities, neighborhood associations, banks utilized a variety of legal, economic, and social strategies, including terror, to knit this mantra of separate and unequal deeply into the fabric of Long Island. And we're still paying the price, right? This region remains one of the most segregated in the entire country. Real estate processes of redlining and blockbusting that were responsible for preserving housing segregation, even as communities changed throughout the 20th century, were part of Long Island's story. In the 1960s, about a decade before the Brookhaven landfill was built, North Bellport changed over from a mostly white working class community to a majority Black working and middle class community. In this period, there was a case involving a real estate agent named Gerald Cutler and his actions in North Bellport. This was one of the region's first cases addressing blockbusting. So blockbusting is a practice where unscrupulous real estate agents prey on the racial fears of white folks about integration to precipitate the rapid sale of a number of homes within a neighborhood. How blockbusting worked is that agents would tell white people that Black folks are moving into the neighborhood. They would put out flyers, they would create a whisper network, and then through this pressure, allow the country's history of exclusion, its history of devaluing Black property and Black life to just do its work. White households would rush to sell their house and leave the neighborhood. Quick sales would follow, and the agents would make a profit for themselves. In this way, Black families who were excluded from buying in other parts of Brookhaven town would find that the only places that they could buy would be in these neighborhoods of rapid flux. In this way, racial segregation would be preserved, even as Black and Latinx families moved out onto Long Island, moved into Brookhaven town specifically. This is our history. By 1970, North Bellport had changed over in just the course of 10 years from a white community to a largely Black community. In fact, it was one of only 2 majority Black and Latinx communities in Brookhaven town. So in this context of segregation, the decision was made by Brookhaven town and New York State agencies to place a new landfill in the North Bellport School District. Over the next decades, the other local landfills throughout Brookhaven town would fill up and close. But the one by North Bellport expanded and expanded, becoming the waste depository not only for Brookhaven town, but for the whole region. So if we want to address the harm of the Brookhaven landfill, we must recognize that this is not just a technical problem of a mound of garbage and what to do with the garbage. If only it were. The landfill is a monument to our history of racial exclusion and racial violence here in Suffolk County. The question is not what to do with the garbage. The question is, and has always been, whose community, whose lives are worth protecting? Why did the town make provisions to close and limit the Manorville and Holtzville local landfills in the 70s and 80s and only think of expanding the Brookhaven landfill? What does this say? Today, we face these same dynamics as the Brookhaven town supervisor and many of the town board theatrically scratch their heads and act puzzled about this landfill, saying, who can figure it out? How do we close it? How do we make up the revenue? Well, landfills are closing every day. The only question is how much time and energy and resources are we willing to invest in this problem? The only question is whose lives are we working hard to protect? There is no lack of solutions to address this waste crisis. Throughout this country, you have states and communities who are working to divert waste from landfills and doing so effectively, bringing new best-in-class technologies online, creating new types of sustainable economies. Unfortunately, here in Brookhaven town, we are very behind the times when it comes to waste disposal. We have not had a waste audit that is a waste characterization in which we would know exactly what goes out to Covanta to be burned and what comes back to the landfill. We do not have a timeline to bring our waste output down. And all of our groundwater, all of our air, all of our marine life are suffering for this. This status quo has continued because the town has not yet seen fit to properly care for and protect the lives of all its residents. So we have to close here. We are offering gratitude to Reverend Dr. King and to his ability to hold a vision of radical transformation for all of us. I'm grateful to all of you for the work you are doing and will continue to do to pursue these visions of radical transformation in this particular geography. And I'll just end with one short story. I guess I always have to mention my kids when I speak at Building Bridges Brookhaven events. So this past fall, when we moved into the South Country School District, my son was playing soccer on the field right in the shadow of the landfill. And the first time that we reached the soccer fields and he was about to play, we looked up at that mountain of trash so high. And I was about to launch into a tirade to him about how distressing it was. And he, thank God, beat me to the punch. He said, "Look at that beautiful mountain. I can't wait to hike it. I can't wait to climb it. Can we go and explore there afterwards?" He looked at this behemoth, this scar on the back of Siwanhaki, and saw something entirely different, a vision of restoration. It took my breath away. I hold on to this vision for him, and I thank him for sharing it with me. And I'm glad to share it now with you so that we can continue to fight for the change that we need. Thank you.